Blizzard described delves as a role-agnostic experience suitable for solo players. But can you truly design content that's challenging and enjoyable for 3 different roles? I wanted to test delves from the perspective of a tank role. After all, you can solo delves as a DPS and even a healer. You might be wondering, what's the point of tanking in a delve? With no party or threat to manage, it could sound a bit dull. And that's a valid concern, but let me assure you, it's better than you might expect. That's why in this video I'll give my honest opinion on solo tanking in delves after trying out all 6 classes in the War Within beta, and maybe even inspire some folks to try tanking for the very first time in their WoW career. So let's start from the top. As a seasoned Mythic Plus tank player, I thought delves are going to be a piece of cake. My first few attempts, I blasted in a delve, pulling everything in my sight and thinking that my health bar won't budge. And oh boy, I was glad to find out how wrong I was. Pulling multiple packs in a delve is not really viable. There's too many abilities to deal with it. You kinda need to pay attention to what each mob does and deal with it. The physical melee damage was somewhat manageable if I kept my active mitigation up, but the main damage that kept killing me was spell damage from ranged casters. And yes, with more gear, speedrunning a delve might be possible. However, during the beta, my Action level was scaled to 600 in a tier 8 delves, and I didn't really optimize my gear with enchants or trinkets, just a tier set. So there's a good chance that by the time you reach tier 8 delves on live, your gear setup will be more optimal. What I quickly realized was that delves are a great way of learning new class spec, not just tanking. It is way better than Proving Grounds or Training Dummy, an actual adventure. It is the perfect starting point for people wanting to pick up tanking before deep diving into Mythic Plus. Normal or heroic dungeons are not great when you're trying to learn new class or a role and your party moves with a different pace than you, especially when everything just dies instantly because there's this one overgeared DPS and you finish the dungeon without really learning anything. Delves don't have that problem. You can just zone in solo and slowly learn things. And because there are 11 tiers total, you have plenty of levels to challenge yourself with before jumping into the scary world of Mythic Plus. Another thing that I loved is that I could play whatever hero talents that I wanted. There's almost certain going to be a specific hero talents meta, even for tanks in raids and Mythic Plus. But when doing solo delves, you're free to play whatever you want. If you for whatever reason prefer one hero talent over another, that is absolutely fine. Like I said at the start, I've tested all talent classes in delves. They play differently and they all felt like a viable option. But I do want to mention 2 tanks that stood out to me. The first one is one of my all-time favorites, Paladin. Having tons of interrupts was definitely a plus, and a World of Glory healing was actually pretty good. Paladin also has good defensives and an oh crap button if you messed up. The other tank to mention, surprising to me, is Warrior. It was actually one of the strongest tanks overall in my opinion. For some reason I barely took any damage, it was easy to play and both Spell Reflect and Spell Block felt overpowered. I also want to mention the contributions of our companion Brann's Bronzebeard. My first go-to option was DPS Brann and he was actually doing a lot of damage. A good 70% came from Brann and his abilities. And he's not even max level yet. So it made me wonder, how would a tank and a healer Brann mesh together? Suffice to say, that was a very different experience. Overall DPS was much slower and so the packs took longer. And even though there was technically less danger of me dying, pulling big was still not an option. And in a really sticky situation, Brann could not keep up the same way a real healer would. On average, it felt a delve was about 20% slower, and the logs do not look good for a healer Brann. But then it hit me. This might be a great choice for new players that are just learning the rotation and want mobs to live longer to practice. Of course, if you're more confident in your tank abilities and want to complete delves in quicker times, then DPS Brann is a better option. However, there's one thing I want to criticize, it's the boss fights. There just wasn't enough going on to kill me or make it difficult. The lack of traditional tank mechanics due to delves being role agnostic might be the main reason, and the bosses that had few too many close range abilities were nearly impossible. I can't imagine how melee DPS are going to deal with those. Looking at you, Spinshroom. Although a few bosses were more enjoyable, overall the tuning seemed tailored for DPS players. finally, to close off this video, I have 3 takeaways from my solo Delves experiences so far. Number 1. Tanking in Delves is not just time efficient, but it is also very enjoyable, to the point where I prefer it to a solo DPS Delves. Number 2. It is a great place for beginner players to start their tanking journey. Brann does enough damage to not worry about mobs living too long, and a huge positive point, he actually does overtake aggro if you don't pay attention. Focusing on survival and controlling the mobs is a fun starting experience for players wanting to improve their tanking game. And last, the most important, you can play whatever talents and hero talents you like. No pressure to use the meta. It is clear that Delves is a missing link for new players to pick up new roles before jumping into cold waters of Mythic Plus and raiding, and I have no doubt that Blizzard's new addition to the game will be a success. Well, that's it from me. I'm definitely looking forward to tanking in Delves, and hopefully so are you. Have a great day, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next one.